The crystal chandelier trembled as Clara's father slammed his palm against the mahogany table. "If you walk out that door, you're no longer a Whitmore." The words carved themselves into the air, heavy and final. Clara's heart pounded beneath the silk of her engagement dress, her trembling hand clutching the cheap silver ring Ethan had given her. It wasn't just love that made her defiant. It was freedom. Across the table, Margaret's eyes burned with silent fury, her pearls gleaming like chains. Ethan stood by the doorway, grease under his nails, sweat on his brow, looking wildly out of place amid marble and gold. The storm outside rattled the mansion windows, mirroring the one inside. Clara exhaled, her voice shaking but steady. "Then I'll make a new name." And as she took Ethan's hand, lightning flashed, cutting the world between wealth and love in two. Rain soaked Clara's dress as they ran down the marble steps, her laughter breaking through tears. The air smelled of freedom and storm. Ethan's arm wrapped around her protectively as they reached his rusted pickup, headlights cutting through the fog. For the first time, she wasn't surrounded by servants or chauffeurs, just him and the open road. Behind them, the Whitmore mansion stood still, its lights flickering like fading pride. As the truck rumbled away, Clara pressed her forehead against the window, watching her past disappear in raindrops, knowing love had cost her everything and given her something greater. The road stretched endless beneath the wiper's rhythm. Inside the truck, silence spoke louder than words. Clara leaned against Ethan's shoulder, eyes heavy but heart awake. The world outside blurred into streaks of rain and city light. Ethan glanced at her, his jaw tightening, not from doubt, but from awe. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked softly. Clara smiled, voice trembling through exhaustion. "I was never ready to stay." The city faded behind them, and a new life began. Not with a plan, but with courage. They reached Ethan's apartment near dawn, a tiny space above his garage, smelling faintly of oil and coffee. Clara stood in the doorway, her gown clinging to her skin, her heels sinking into the cracked linoleum. Yet, in the warmth of his nervous smile, she saw something money could never buy: sincerity. "It's not much," Ethan murmured, rubbing the back of his neck. Clara stepped forward, taking his hand. "It's ours," she whispered. In that moment, the morning light poured through the window, turning dust into gold and poverty into promise. As dawn broke, Clara sat by the small window, wrapped in Ethan's jacket. She could still hear her father's voice echoing in her mind, but it no longer ruled her. Outside, the city hummed, ordinary and unjudging. She traced the fog on the glass and wrote one word: free. Behind her, Ethan placed a steaming mug in her hands, kissed the top of her head, and smiled. For the first time, she wasn't the Whitmore heir. She was simply Clara. And that was enough. 6 months later, the hum of Ethan's garage had replaced the echo of marble halls. Clara swept the oil-stained floor, her once manicured hands now marked by effort and love. The smell of gasoline mixed with the sweetness of her morning coffee. They didn't have servants, designer clothes, or lavish dinners, but they had laughter. They had peace. When Ethan's arm brushed hers as they worked side by side, she felt richer than she ever had in silk. The world outside still whispered her name with pity, but Clara had learned something new. Pity fades. Purpose lasts. Every night, Ethan tinkered with his tools, while Clara sketched ideas for the garage's new logo. She'd gone from attending charity galas to budgeting every coin, and strangely, she'd never felt more fulfilled. They'd sit cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by spare parts and laughter. Sometimes she'd look at him and wonder if love had been waiting for her all along, hidden under the smell of motor oil. The stars outside blinked through the grimy window, as if applauding two souls who'd found beauty in the dirt. One morning, Clara walked to the corner market with grease still on her cheek and a grocery list written on a napkin. She caught a glimpse of herself in a shop window. No makeup, no jewels, no title, and smiled. The reflection staring back wasn't the daughter of wealth. It was a woman who had earned her peace. The cashier, a kind old lady, slipped her an extra apple. "For your husband," she said with a wink. Clara laughed, realizing that in this small neighborhood, she wasn't a fallen heiress. She was home. Ethan's business began to grow slowly. Word spread that the Whitmore girl was helping fix cars with her husband, and curiosity turned into admiration. Neighbors brought them lunch, friends became customers, and laughter filled the garage daily. Clara watched Ethan work, his focus pure and unpretentious. He'd look up occasionally, catch her gaze, and smile, a silent promise that they'd made the right choice. The air smelled of new beginnings and burnt rubber, and for Clara, that scent was freedom. That night, after closing the garage, Ethan led Clara outside. He'd set up a small dinner table under hanging string lights beside the old truck that had carried them away from her past. "Happy 6 months," he said, pulling out a chair with mock formality. Clara laughed through tears as they shared sandwiches and cheap wine, the stars reflecting in her eyes. "Do you miss it?" Ethan asked quietly. She took his hand, smiling. "No," she whispered. "For the first time, I'm exactly where I belong." While Clara and Ethan's laughter filled their small apartment, across the city, the Whitmore mansion grew eerily quiet. The whispers of investors turned into threats. The walls that once echoed with power now carried tension. Charles stared at the financial reports spread across his desk, the numbers bleeding red. Margaret stood beside him, gripping her pearls like a lifeline. Pride had once been their armor. Now it felt like a weight dragging them under. "Well, recover," Charles muttered, though his voice trembled. But deep down he knew the empire they'd built on image was collapsing, and there was no one left to believe the illusion. The next morning, news broke like thunder. Whitmore Holdings declares bankruptcy. Headlines screamed across glossy magazines that once celebrated their wealth. Margaret's phone buzzed endlessly, her so-called friends offering shallow condolences and quiet gossip. She hurled the device across the room, her reflection fractured in the shattered mirror. Charles sat by the window, tie undone, staring blankly at the garden where Clara once played. "We had everything," Margaret whispered, tears breaking her practiced calm. "No," Charles said softly. "We had nothing real." Meanwhile, Clara heard the news on the radio while tightening a bolt on a customer's car. Her wrench paused midair, her heart caught between sadness and disbelief. Ethan looked up, reading her expression without needing words. "You can go see them if you want," he said gently. Clara shook her head. "They made their choice," she whispered. But as she turned back to her work, a quiet ache lingered behind her strength, the ache of a daughter who still cared, despite everything. Back at the Whitmore estate, the servants packed their belongings, and silence swallowed the house. Margaret wandered through the halls like a ghost, touching the grand piano, the portraits, the glittering staircase, all the symbols of the life she'd worshipped. Charles sat in his study, the deed to the mansion spread before him, the ink of loss still wet. Pride had once made him powerful. Now it left him powerless. The empire was gone, and with it, the illusion of control. By nightfall, the Whitmores drove away from their mansion in silence, their faces reflected in the tinted glass like ghosts of their former selves. Margaret stared out the window, her reflection warped by rain. "Do you think she knows?" she asked quietly. Charles didn't answer. The once mighty family, reduced to whispers and regret, disappeared into the storm. And somewhere across town, Clara slept peacefully, unaware that destiny was already steering her parents back toward her door. The knock came in the quiet of early evening. Clara's heart skipped, not with fear, but with disbelief. At the door stood Margaret Whitmore, her elegant posture replaced with a stiff unease, pearls gone, hair slightly disheveled. Beside her, Charles Whitmore, in a worn suit, looked smaller than ever, pride folded into lines of exhaustion. Clara's hand hovered over the latch, and Ethan, stood silently behind her, his brow furrowed but supportive. The storm had passed outside, yet the air felt heavy with unspoken apologies and lingering bitterness. "Clara," Margaret whispered, voice fragile. We need help." Clara opened the door wider, tension bristling between apology and defiance. "You're here after everything?" she asked, voice steady but cold. Margaret's lips trembled, eyes glistening with tears. "We've lost everything," she admitted, her voice cracking. Charles' gaze flickered, seeking understanding, yet finding none. Ethan stepped forward, his presence grounding Clara. The weight of past wounds lingered in the air, thick and suffocating, yet beneath it all simmered a quiet question. Could love still forgive this kind of pride? Clara invited them inside, the air tense with unspoken accusations. Margaret flinched at the modest furniture, the absence of luxury, the smell of motor oil lingering faintly. Charles shuffled awkwardly, eyes fixed on Ethan, a silent evaluation of the man who had stolen his daughter's allegiance. Yet Clara's calm presence anchored the room, reminding them that respect and dignity weren't tied to wealth. "You can stay," she said simply, "but understand this. Things are different now." Silence filled the space, a fragile bridge between past and present. Dinner was a quiet affair, punctuated by the occasional clink of utensils. Margaret's fingers hovered over her glass, unused to the simplicity of paper plates and home-cooked meals. Charles watched Clara carefully, his pride warring with his desperation. Ethan poured wine into mismatched cups, breaking the tension with a small, easy smile. Clara noticed every tremor, every faltering glance, and felt a strange empathy. She could see the cost of arrogance etched in their faces, the same faces that once towered over her with judgment. This was their reckoning, and her compassion would define its outcome. After dinner, Clara led them to the small living room, where framed photos of her and Ethan's early struggles lined the wall. Margaret's fingers traced a photo of Clara laughing on a rain-soaked sidewalk, the memory cutting into her guilt. Charles sighed heavily, the weight of years pressing down on him. I never realized," he murmured, voice low. Clara sat beside Ethan, hands folded calmly. "It's not too late," she said, soft but firm. The room hummed with fragile hope, the moment when a broken family might begin to stitch itself back together. The morning light filtered through the small living room, falling on the anxious faces of Margaret Whitmore and Charles Whitmore. Clara stood by the window, arms folded, her calm a sharp contrast to the storm of guilt before her. "You thought wealth made you better than me," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of years. Margaret's lips trembled, Charles' jaw tightened. Ethan stood beside Clara, silent but protective. Clara's words hung in the air like lightning, unforgiving yet illuminating. For the first time, her parents were seeing her not as the heiress they controlled, but as a woman they had underestimated. Margaret's voice broke first. "He only wanted the best for you," she whispered, tears spilling freely. "The best?" Clara's laugh was sharp, unflinching. "The best is love. The best is respect. The best is standing by people who care for you, not who bow to status." Charles hung his head, shame settling into the lines of his face. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on Clara's shoulder. Silence followed, thick and heavy, the kind that only truth can carve into years of pride. Charles finally raised his eyes, voice barely audible. "I thought power defined us, that wealth would keep us safe." Clara stepped closer, tone firm, unwavering. "Power without love is nothing. Wealth without respect is empty." "Wealth without respect is empty." "You taught me that pride is dangerous. Now you're living it." Ethan's eyes met hers with quiet approval. He knew she wasn't angry for spite, but for justice. Margaret bowed her head, finally seeing the truth she had ignored for decades. The walls of the apartment, small and humble, seemed to echo the weight of this revelation. Margaret whispered almost to herself, "We judged. We hurt. We were wrong." Clara's eyes softened, a single exhale releasing years of restrained frustration. She said, "but now you can choose differently. You can learn humility. You can choose to rebuild, not in money, but in character." Charles nodded slowly, the weight of ego lifting slightly, the first seeds of repentance taking root. Ethan watched her, proud of the compassion that even adversity hadn't eroded. This was the moment when a family, fractured by pride, glimpsed the possibility of reconciliation. By evening, the tension had lifted slightly, replaced with quiet conversation. Margaret asked about their life, genuinely curious, humbled. Charles offered a small, tentative smile, a shadow of the man he once was. Clara realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about giving the opportunity for change. Ethan poured tea, and as they sipped in silence, the apartment felt alive in a way the mansion never had. Pride had been dismantled, humility had entered, and the first true connection in years was forming. Love. She understood, had finally leveled the playing field. Morning, sunlight streamed through the small garage apartment as Clara handed Margaret a set of overalls. "Today, you will help me organize the workshop," she said with a soft smile. Margaret hesitated, her hands trembling at the unfamiliar fabric, but the look in Clara's eyes left no room for pride. Charles lingered near the door, suit abandoned for a simple shirt and jeans, watching his wife step into the unknown with curiosity and humility. Ethan leaned against the counter, smiling quietly, witnessing a metamorphosis. The day was ordinary, yet it carried the weight of a lifetime of lessons, grace found in small acts. As the day progressed, Margaret learned to polish the engines and organize parts, laughter replacing tension. Clara guided her patiently, showing that pride could be replaced by purpose. Charles tackled paperwork for Ethan's growing business, discovering satisfaction in productivity, not prestige. The Whitmores, once masters of marble and gold, found dignity in labor and sincerity in small achievements. Clara watched them with quiet pride. The empire might have been gone, but the essence of family, humility, and respect had finally taken root. By evening, the family gathered around a small fire pit in the courtyard, roasting vegetables from the modest garden Ethan had started. Margaret laughed genuinely for the first time in years as Charles tentatively shared a story from their past, stripped of arrogance. Clara listened, heart full, while Ethan handed plates and smiled at their newfound closeness. It was far from lavish, far from perfect, but it was theirs. The night sky stretched endlessly above, stars reflecting the quiet magic of redemption and the profound power of humility. Weeks turned into months, and the Whitmores adapted to their new lives. Margaret discovered joy in volunteering at local community centers, helping families in need, her pride replaced by empathy. Charles used his knowledge to mentor young entrepreneurs, teaching lessons he had learned the hard way. Clara watched them transform, grateful that love had not only built her life, but had given them a second chance to understand what truly mattered. Ethan squeezed her hand quietly, a silent celebration of the life they had created together. One evening, as the family sat together in the cozy apartment, Charles spoke quietly. "I see now. It wasn't wealth or status that mattered. It was love, courage, and character." Margaret nodded, eyes glistening. Clara smiled softly, resting her head on Ethan's shoulder, feeling the warmth of a family rebuilt from humility and respect. Outside, the city lights shimmered, reflecting in their peaceful eyes. The empire may have fallen, but a new, unbreakable family foundation had been built, stronger than gold, richer than wealth, and guided by heart. Years had passed, and the small garage apartment had grown into a thriving community hub. Clara, now radiating confidence tempered by grace, oversaw a workshop full of apprentices, learning not just mechanics but life lessons. Ethan stood beside her, his hands steady, teaching with patience honed over years. Margaret Whitmore coordinated donations and schedules, her elegance replaced by genuine warmth. Charles Whitmore, 58, offered guidance to young entrepreneurs. The Whitmores had transformed completely, not back into the empire they lost, but into something far more valuable. Grounded, humble, and truly connected. One afternoon, Clara and Ethan walked through the courtyard with their children, laughter spilling into the air. Margaret and Charles watched from the workshop balcony, smiles etched into their faces, humbled by the joy that wasn't bought but earned. The lessons of humility, patience, and love had come full circle. Clara caught Ethan's eye and squeezed his hand. They didn't need wealth to feel powerful. Love had given them everything. That evening, the family gathered for a simple dinner under string lights, reminiscent of the first time the Whitmores had been welcomed into Clara's humble home. Conversations flowed freely, punctuated by laughter and shared memories. Clara realized that true wealth wasn't in marble halls or flashy cars. It was here, in these imperfect golden moments. Ethan lifted his glass. "To family," he said softly. "To love," Clara added. Margaret and Charles echoed the toast, their eyes reflecting the hard-earned lessons of a lifetime. Later, Clara walked alone to the small balcony, gazing at the city lights twinkling in the distance. The past, the wealth, the betrayal, the exile, felt like a distant echo. Her parents had returned, humbled, changed, and the cycle of pride had finally ended. Ethan joined her quietly, slipping his hand into hers. "We did it," he whispered. Clara smiled, feeling the full circle satisfaction. Life had tested them, broken them, and now gifted them the truest inheritance: love, resilience, and family. Finally, the Whitmores gathered one last time in the garage workshop, now buzzing with life and laughter. Margaret handed a tool to a young apprentice. Charles offered guidance to another. Clara and Ethan watched, hearts full. Pride had been replaced by humility, wealth by love, judgment by compassion. The family had endured storms, lost empires, and broken pride. But through it all, they had discovered the most enduring inheritance of all: the strength of character and the power of unexpected parenthood, forgiveness, and love.